What's going on, everybody? It's Moonshine, the Hillbilly Hellraiser. Welcome back to another Moonshine Talkin'. Hope you're all having a good one. I'm doing all right. Uh, if I look a little red faced, it's because I just got done working out a little bit ago, and I'm still probably geeked up on C4. And I had a cup of coffee, so that probably doesn't help. Um, but otherwise, I'm fine. I don't want anyone to think like I'm like my head's about to explode or anything like that, but not that anybody is really that concerned, I don't believe. But nonetheless, yeah, all is well. Can't complain. It's about that time of year where everybody is starting to do their best of albums of the year lists. I started watching a couple of those. Thought they were kind of interesting. Uh, saw some stuff that I didn't hear of here this year, stuff that I missed, stuff that I agreed with, maybe didn't really care too much about. It's always fun, it's always a good time to see everybody's perspective on what hit, missed, and what people slept on for the year. So it's always cool watching that. But I do find it interesting that people started doing stuff right at the beginning of December, and because man, it's already. I was just telling somebody the other day, it felt like I was just listening to Christmas music and we're already back at it. So, I mean, the end of this year, this third quarter has flown by. It just seemed like one minute it was October, then next thing you knew it was Thanksgiving, and now we're heading right into Christmas and it'll be the end of the year before you blink. And man, time flies sometimes. But yeah, so I just find it kind of weird a little bit or not even weird, I would say more premature that people are starting to do their end of year lists at the beginning of December. It just seems to me that there's still stuff coming out, and out of respect to some of those bands, maybe you want to give it a moment. But then again, maybe not because maybe people have gotten their fill of new releases for the year, and they go, you know what, there's nothing that really interests me, so I'm gonna hold off on. I don't need to hold off. On doing a new release, I'll just go on my album of the year list. I'll just go ahead and do it. Which I understand that, but there's a few things coming out in December that have a little bit of interest to me, so I'm kind of holding off a little bit. Not that that's a huge deal, as I fidget with stuff on my desk here. But anyhow, the reason I'm here is I just so happen I popped on the TV and threw on the YouTube to have some background stuff while I was milling about my place, and I saw that John Cena was on the Joe Rogan Experience, which I was like, oh, this ought to be interesting. I don't really watch Joe Rogan's show. I was never one of those big Rogan guys. I've watched his show in the past. If he's got an interesting guest on there, I'll check it out. But I don't typically sit and listen to 2, 3, 4 hour uh, interviews that he does. Um, in a lot of respects, I don't find him to be a good interviewer. I think sometimes, and I noticed this a little bit on this one too, it's one of the reasons why I don't really watch his stuff, is that he just sometimes he doesn't seem like he's listening to the guest. He almost like he's just waiting for the opportunity to interrupt and make whatever point that he's going to make. And but I'm not one of those Joe Rogan haters either. I know there's people out there that they absolutely despise Rogan for one reason or another. People who are kind of on the lower end of the comedy spectrum don't like him because they think he's way too successful for being what they consider as unfunny. They blame him for a whole host and bunch of comedians that they think are also equally as untalented, like Brian Callen and Brendan Schaub and uh, Bert Kreischer and people of that nature. Tony Hinchcliffe, who we'll talk about in a second. But it's like anything. You don't have to listen to him. You don't have to watch him. I know a lot of people have pretty much they make money off making fun of these guys. So if that's your thing, whatever. That's fine. Go go do what you want, and if you find an audience for it, good for you. But yeah, I don't listen to him that much. That's the point of this. Uh, But he did have an interesting guest. I find John Cena to be an interesting person. He's very much he's been a huge, if not one of the most central figures in the pro wrestling industry for the past couple of decades. He's been the top guy in WWE, which is without a doubt the biggest wrestling company in the world. He's been their top guy for the past couple of decades. So having him on is definitely it's cool to listen to him talk for. I think it was roughly like 2.25 hours was what he did. He did like 2 hours and 13 minutes, something like that. They Joe Rogan, because he knows nothing about pro wrestling as much as he's had pro wrestlers on his show. He's had Jake the Snake, he's had DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, he's had a few other guys. I think he's done one with The Undertaker. And he knows nothing about wrestling, but you'd think at the very least, and this probably goes to the sometimes he doesn't listen, he'd know a little bit of something about it. Even so, you want to go even further. You think he'd take a little bit of time to know about it, seeing as TKO owns WWE and UFC. So if you're gonna have wrestlers on, you think that you'd have a little working knowledge outside of, oh yeah, I used to watch that a little bit when I was a kid. So he brings on Tony Hinchcliffe. Tony Hinchcliffe is a comedian. He does a lot of work with Joe Rogan. He's gotten his foot into the door with WWE. He's kind of he's leveraged his podcast Kill Tony into a working arrangement with the WWE. Uh, I don't really know too much about. I've seen his show maybe once or twice, Kill Tony, and it's okay. It's basically they give open mic comics a minute or so to show their stuff, and he and a panel of guests will critique the person. I think maybe one time I watched it when Jim Norton was on, because Jim Norton, he's one of my favorite comedians throughout the years. Was on Opie and Anthony, and I liked a lot of his comedy. I know he's got a podcast, but I don't really watch it too much. I think I watched it when Anthony Cumia was on there, and they talk. You know, the two of them have very good chemistry and talking about the old days and stuff like that. Because I like Opie and Anthony. It was a good radio show from New York back in the day, kind of rivaled Howard Stern a little bit. And so whenever people get together, and that's another time where I'll watch Joe Rogan shows if he's got a comedian like that on, like if he's got Norton or Cumia, or he's got like Nick DiPaolo or Colin Quinn, somebody like that, and those guys are just, to me, they're some of the funniest people in the world, and watch them riff with him is always fun. Just kind of takes you back to that time when they would all go on the show and riff with each other and beat each other up, and someone have time in the barrel, and everybody, everyone would take a beating. So just good stuff. But as I babble here about all that sort of stuff. So Tony Hinchcliffe is a huge wrestling fan, so he's, I guess, there to be kind of the buffer between the guest and the host. So he's there, and uh, one of the first things that they talked about, which was kind of interesting, was I had to take notes here, but they're all written in pencil, so I can't really see them all that well. Uh, One of the first things that they hit on right out of the chute was Cena talked about the controversy that developed when he was promoting Fast and Furious. Because since he's pretty much, I think one of the main things they're promoting is the fact that he's on his retirement tour, what they refer to as the Last Time Is Now tour, and he's getting ready to finish up his dates with. He's got one more date left with WWE, and then he's done. I think he's going to go make movies, do all of his voiceover work. If you're not familiar with him from wrestling, certainly I'm sure some people know him from the Peacemaker. You hear his voice everywhere. He does a crap ton of voiceover work, and from car commercials to this and that, you can hear his voice everywhere. He's got a very distinct voice, and he's in a lot of different commercials, does a lot of voiceover work, but he's also in a ton of movies, and he's starting to make the transition into Hollywood, which he discussed later as well. But the first thing he talked about was, or one of the first things was, he talked about the controversy that developed out of him doing a promotional tour for the Fast and Furious in China. And it started out with, I thought was kind of interesting. He talked about back in I want to say maybe the late 2000s, WWE had a program for all of its talent where they would help them as far as they would pay for them to go get financial literacy courses. They would pay for them if they wanted to continue any secondary education, like going to college, taking night courses, getting a degree. Um, they offered them language courses where if you wanted to go learn a new language, you could do that. And I mean, all these things that they're offering the talent because I think they wanted them to have a career outside of and beyond the pro wrestling business, or at least have a skill that they could use that might be useful in the pro wrestling business, I would imagine. But I think a lot of it was just they didn't want to have a situation where so many 80s wrestlers were either pissed away all their earnings or were addicted to drugs and really I mean, the business has been hard for a lot of people. And I don't think, like a lot of major sports franchises and everything, they kind of do that thing where they try to get them to no, we need to prepare you for a life outside of this because you got a very finite window. And wrestling, it's a very finite time that you have because it's such a it's a taxing thing on the body. So you only have so many bumps on your bump card. And so being prepared for a life away from the ring is kind of that's a cool thing. And it's cool that they would pay for it and everything. And so he decided he would lead by example, and he decided that he wanted to go learn Mandarin. And he was one of three people that he said took part in the program. He said the other ones were Claudio Castagnoli, and who he wrestled as Cesaro in WWE. And he had already spoken. He already speaks 5 or 6 languages, but I think he wanted to just get a refresher course on one of them. So he took that. He took him up on the offer. And then Natty Neidhart, Jim Neidhart's daughter, she's been with them forever, and she, I guess, took part in it. But he said, other than that, nobody else did it, which is bizarre to me. I don't know why anyone there wouldn't have wanted to do that. But he did it because he was saying how it seemed like a good opportunity to try to get somebody to represent not just WWE but the business and try to work into the Asian Chinese market, which is it's smart. I mean, he's a very smart guy, very forward thinking, very business and goal oriented. Anybody I know who's ever met him says that, and anyone who talks about him, that's a lot of people say he's very motivated, ambitious. He's very well researched on a lot of things. So he took Mandarin for 10 years, and eventually he got to use it. He got good enough at it to where he was able to use it on a promotional tour for the Fast and Furious movie. But then he got into some hot water because according to what he was saying, is they gave him a press statement or something or other, and he spoke about it, and it was something to do with the China. He referred to Taiwan as its own country in China, and that's a whole geopolitical hot potato. And then he just discussed being, it just caused a lot of issues. And then he famously apologized in Mandarin to the Chinese people for doing that. And of course, here in the States, everybody was trashing him. And for a while there, they were calling him John. I forget how they pronounced it, but like I think the one guy's Xi Jinping. So they spelled his name instead of Cena with the Gina or something like that. So a lot of people, particularly on the internet, were giving him a lot of grief about that. So he talked about that. He talked about being accountable for his actions. He should have, even though he thought he was doing a good thing and he was promoting the movie in a good way, he was ignorant of the situation. And even though he really wasn't trying to get involved in all that, he ended up, and then of course, being called unpatriotic and stuff like that when he very much loves the country, loves the US. He felt like that was, that really hurt him. So it was kind of interesting. It was a very interesting story, a very interesting take on things because he did get a lot of grief from a lot of people on that. Like a lot of people thought he was just a sellout, and it's a political hot potato, and I'm not going to get into that because that's not what I'm here. I'm just here to talk about the interview. So that was one of the first things I thought was interesting. One of my main takeaways from it was he was discussing the different business models from when Vince was in charge and when he was coming up versus the way things are done today. And what I thought was interesting about that is, first of all, he talked about how many people are in NXT, which is developmental. And he said they have about 200 people in there at any given time. And if you multiply that number over a certain period of time, I think he said it was something like 6,000 people will come and go, and maybe like what is that? That's like 200 people in in a month, and that's what, like 30 months or so. I forget what the numbers were, but he said it was something crazy to the amount of where he said all he expects is one out of every 6,000 people who come through the doors of NXT to make it and be a high level superstar within the company, which that's wild. That's a crazy number, especially when you figure even that's low, but even when you think about it from when he was in OVW, they had at the very least, they developed at least four major talents back then. And that's not even including all the secondary talent that they developed there. But when he was breaking in, when he was coming up in the business in OVW, they had him, Brock Lesnar, Dave Batista, Randy Orton, and then a lot of secondary guys. The guys who had decent runs, they're not there in the company anymore, but a lot of them had pretty decent runs in the business. The Bashams, Nick Dinsmore, uh, trying to think of some of the other guys. The Spirit Squad, Ken Doane, Nick Nemeth, who was there for quite some time. I don't know if he was quite in OVW. He was more of an FCW guy or a Deep South, but he was there for a while. I mean, they had a lot of guys who they were able to be there for a bit, but they certainly they had at least four stellar standout top guys that they created through that program. And now he's talking about, if we're lucky to get one, he considers that a blessing, which is it's kind of crazy to me. It's almost like it makes me think that just the just the short attention span of people, the lack of patience on not just the company itself, but the people involved in the business. Like people get into it, they recruit out of college a lot nowadays, or you get people who are they just want to be there to they want to be there to use it as a springboard to get into some other facet of uh, media or entertainment, and they just want to use it to be famous, maybe promote something else. And it's just it's crazy. And they even talked about that later on in the program. They talked about this guy, this content creator, I Show Speed, and he was at, I want to say Royal Rumble. They got him in Royal Rumble. He was there as a guest and as a celebrity or something or other. And then he got in the match and he got demolished by Braun Breaker, which is Rick Steiner's kid. If you don't know who Braun Breaker is, phenomenal talent. Definitely one of the guys I consider is probably the future of the business. As long as he stays injury free and healthy and good head on his shoulders. But yeah, I just thought it was just crazy. But I guess it is what it is. But then he continued. He was talking more and more about how they've gone from where in his day, in his era, and even before that, they were on the road all the time doing house shows. Uh, it would lead to a TV taping, and then eventually everything you do more house shows, and it eventually lead to the pay-per-views. Now they basically, the way he's describing it, is it's all media related content. It's all media driven content. So everything is designed for television. Everything is designed for Netflix or whatever else they got going on. And now they don't even really do house shows. And it's weird because you got this weird dynamic between, or I shouldn't, weird is again not the best word, but it's this dynamic between you you have this company which is making money hand over fist versus the people that they have on their show aren't getting the time in the ring that they need to own their craft, and they're also not developing that body callus that you need to have like the sustainability to be in a pro wrestling ring over time. Like you need to take like I was saying earlier, you only have so many bumps on your bump card, but at the same time you have to take the bumps to be able to develop enough of a body callus to where you get used to the punishment, you get used to the slams and the impact and everything. So it's just one of those things like, well, okay, and there's probably a lot to be said about why so many of the guys were a lot better in the day, and they like Joe kind of like he fed into that a little bit and asked where did these guys learn how to fail, and that's a big part of it is they would go and you do these house shows, and sometimes the house shows were some of the funnest things you could go to because the guys could let loose. They would goof around. They would try stuff. They would do things that maybe you might see on TV, or they'd have talent would go out there, and if they were green, they could go out there and they could do stuff. They could learn on the have on job training, and now basically their on the job training is doing it in front of a camera on live television, which is insane. It's just a ridiculous way to do things, but again, it's the difference I think between where yeah, they're making a lot more money, but at the same time at the expense of the people, the talent learning, and they're making more because they're cutting expenses by not running more shows. And it's like, yeah, that's great for the company, but it's not great for the business. But in all reality, I don't think that TKO TKO Holding, I don't think they really care too much about the business. I just think they see this as something on their spreadsheets and their something that they can, okay, how much are we making from this quarter and so on and so forth. So I think it's to them it's just interchangeable, where a lot of people who are really passionate about the business, they look at it like, no, this is a lifestyle, this is something that we love and we're again passionate about. So it's not just dollars and cents and figures on a chalkboard to us. This is something that's pumping in our veins and our blood and all that sort of thing. But yeah, so that was another one that I thought was kind of interesting. You have to give me a quick second. I got to take a quick break here. Yeah, it was a lot of discussion about the companies making more, but they're investing less, and the risk rewards doing that. I thought that was a really interesting topic. Uh, he put over Dominic Mysterio hard. I mean, he was really like Dominic is probably one of the few people in the company right now that, as far as the younger talent, he's one of the few that get it. But at the same time, of course he does. He's Rey Mysterio's kid. He's been around the business since he was a kid. He's been around people that have probably mentored him along the way. Much in the same regard as Logan Paul, even though Logan Paul's kind of a douche, he's been around the right people and he's athletic and whether he understands the concept of getting heat or whether he understood it before he got into the business, he understood how to get heat. And with him getting into pro wrestling and being a heel, he just has that natural charisma, that ability. As some people would say, he's got that. He's very punchable, and he's able to use that and capitalize on that to be somebody who could be a star, who can be somebody you could look to for the future if he desires to continue being in the business. But yeah, he put over Dom hard. I mean, Dom's great. He's come into his own, and he's definitely leaned into that he's Eddie Guerrero's illegitimate child thing quite a bit, which is very funny. And he's apparently, I haven't watched a lot of the product recently, but I guess he's really doing the lie, cheat, and steal gimmick quite a bit, which is very funny. They showed a clip of it, and yeah, speaking of the thumbnail on this, I was looking for one where it was Rogan, Cena, and Hinchcliffe all in the same shot, and they only did one of those shots, which to me was odd because usually you get a few of those on a Rogan episode, but they only had one where Cena was talking about being at a he was living on the West Coast before he got into the business. He was working at a Gold's or someplace like that, and he ended up just being like a front desk clerk or like the low person on the totem pole. But The Rock came in one day and he took pictures of people and he was taking pictures outside the gym. But in the background, you can see Cena is back there lurking in the shadows. And he got up to show everybody, no, that's me right there. And blah, blah, blah. But he said, I took a picture with him, but that's me right there. But yeah, going back, yeah, he put over Dom hard. I know he just worked with him a little bit, did a little mini program with him. And yeah, Dom's great. He's definitely one of the guys that they ought to be promoting because he's again, he gets it. He understands the business and he understands his role. He understands how to maximize his minutes, and he's good. He's definitely good. But also, kind of going back to the point I was just talking about the way the business model of today versus yesteryear, and yesteryear being probably like 5, 10 years ago, is just the fact that how uh, they don't have that organic trial and error anymore. It seems like all they do is they chase figures and algorithms, and they don't really it's not one of those things where, and I think it's just the nature of you've got a corporation running the place versus a company that was run by a guy who was raised within the wrestling bubble, the guy being Vince McMahon. So he would allow for some sort of he'd allow for that organic experimentation with things, and I think that could be said. You could probably like that could be like a macro thing that you could put out there for a lot of different things, but yeah, it just seems like with a lot of what TKO does versus what TKO versus VKM, the difference being is that there was a lot more organic trial and error versus just the chasing the algorithm and the stats and oh well we got this many hits on this segment versus this over here, and it just doesn't really lend itself to creating it doesn't lend itself to creative if it's such a robotic such a bland and very I want to say not sanitary, but that's not the word I'm looking for. But it's just a very sterile environment. That's what I'm looking for. Uh, so there was that, and then he kind of they switched gears a little bit. They started talking about his transition into films and how he got into that, and it kind of led to some interesting talk. He started getting more philosophical about what he, how his mind works and his worldview and stuff like that. He started talking about his perspectives on opportunity, and he used as an example his another thing he got a lot of grief for, where he was at the Oscars and he went out on stage with a card in front of his junk, and he walked out there naked in front of a whole room full of strangers, and you had some people, particularly in like the internet wrestling subculture, kind of looked at that as a humiliation ritual. It was him going out there and doing some weird Hollywood eyes wide shut ritual that he had to perform in front of all these weirdo degenerate Hollywood types. And the way he described it was something that he didn't really want to do, but Jimmy Kimmel sent him the bit, and he thought that this would be a good opportunity to get his foot in the door and get noticed. In a similar wrestling style principle that you get your foot in the door, you get your opportunity, and then you make the most of the opportunity. And he expounded on that. He really went into depth and detail about that, and I thought it was a very interesting watch and listen to hear him discuss all that and his philosophy on that. He also discussed his beliefs on gratitude and just how he feels like if he can, when they throw him in the dirt, if he feels like he made the most of the opportunities that he was given, then and that he's grateful for the time that he had and made the most of it, then that's all that he can hope for in life, which is very cool. It was a very positive, like very. I I don't want to saying inspirational is strong, but it's one of those things where, like Rogan was saying, he likes to bring successful people onto his show so other people can see how successful people's minds operate, and maybe you can pick something up from that, which that in a sense is useful to people. I guess it's a lot better than dealing, talking about like freaking internet beefs or all the internet drama, or uh, how many colored vinyls there are, how many colored variants there are, and how much you're buying, and all sorts of silly nonsense like that, or even honestly just some of the dumb shit that I talk about. But anyhow, it was a very cool watch, very cool listen, very insightful. John's he's a very interesting person, very interesting figure, not just in the pro wrestling business, but he's got a very, excuse me, he's just got a very unique, interesting philosophy, and I like stuff like that. I like watching and listening to people who who put thought, there's psychology to what they do, and it's stuff that really, like, if you can pick stuff and use it and utilize it in your daily life, then that's it's great. That's a cool thing to do. But yeah, so that was my thoughts. I don't know, maybe some of you go check it out and let me know what you thought of John Cena on Joe Rogan. I thought it was cool. I thought it was interesting. It was a good thing to watch for listen to for 2 hours, and kind of got me through the afternoon. But yeah, man, if you saw it, are gonna see it, have any thoughts, comments, opinions, whatever, just share them with me. It's stuff I like talking about, and yeah, man. So that's what I got for you. So as always, this is Dan Moonshine. Thank you for joining Moonshine Talking. If you enjoy it, go check out the back catalog, like, share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. I'll probably be getting to some of my end of year stuff sooner than later, but I do have a couple things I want to listen to. And I want to listen to a couple other things over again, just to kind of like track my thoughts, and then I'll go from there. So you'll be seeing that in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, other than that, that's what I got for you. Like I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna do some death metal and black metal recommendations, but this came up, and I thought, like, oh no, this is something I want to cover real quick because it's topical, and it was interesting, and it's something that I thought people would enjoy. So anyhow, that's what I got for you. Everyone have a good one. As always, stay sick, stay heavy, stay brutal. Always tuck your chin upon impact. Don't forget to breathe. Have a good one. Take it easy, and I'll catch you on the next video. Later.